Are you a Saskatchewan-based Métis entrepreneur looking to start or grow your business? Welcome to Make It Your Business with Victoria Gagné from the Clarence Campeau Development Fund, a recognized and successful business resource dedicated to guiding and supporting Métis entrepreneurs on their path to success. With a focus on the Métis community, we share our story and our clients' stories about starting their businesses and how we support them from start to finish. We also deliver innovative financial and professional advice to help you start and run a successful business. Join Victoria and her guests and gain an understanding of the services, programs, and support available for you. This podcast is powered by Proudmouth. Now on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Make It Your Business with Victoria Gagné of CCDF. Victoria, how are you?
I'm good, Eric. How are you?
Oh, I'm excited. I'm always excited. You keep bringing on guests, and I know that that's the entire purpose of your podcast, but it's just fun. It is just fun to hear from these different people and the success stories that they've had and the work that they've put into whatever their career is, whatever their business is. And I know you've got another great guest on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have Karey on. We've got, like you said, another good guest with a lot of wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. So listening audience, she has brought on Karey Kapell. Karey is a business coach and mentor for coaches, course creators, and service-based businesswomen looking to grow their income and impact online by stepping more into alignment with their innate wisdom and way of being. She's been an entrepreneur for 10 years now, growing and selling a profitable retail business and now coaching other female business owners for 5+ years. She's worked with well over 200 entrepreneurs, helping them get out of their own way and increase their sales while staying true to who they are and how they want to show up in their business and life. Victoria, that is a great bio. I love that.
I know, it's so fantastic. I got to know Karey through CCDF. She was a client in my portfolio, and over the years, we started to work more closely with our Indigenous women entrepreneurship strategy, and Karey has done a fantastic job facilitating some of our workshops, and I've learned, and I knew this before, but seeing her really in her element in these workshops, just realized how much wisdom she has to share and experience from working with her clients and her own journey as an entrepreneur. And so I knew I had to bring her on to share some of that wisdom.
Absolutely. This is going to be great. Karey, thank you so much for joining Victoria on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I think we're going to have a great conversation today. And what I do kind of want to talk about in this conversation is, like your bio says, how do we develop a growth mindset as entrepreneurs? And, I know when we think about developing a growth mindset, growth can be actually scary. And there are a lot of structural barriers to growth that CCDF works really hard and develops programs to help reduce those barriers to growth. But I think in addition to those external kind of systemic barriers to growth for Métis entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs universally have these internal barriers to growth as well. And so today I kind of want to talk about unlearning some of those limiting beliefs and kind of unpacking that with you today. So thank you again for being on, Karey.
Yes, I'm so excited to dive into this.
I know it's going to be a good one. And so I think to kick it off and thinking about this, developing a growth mindset and unlearning limiting beliefs, I'm curious from your perspective, based on your experience, your personal experience as an entrepreneur, but then also working with clients, what are some limiting beliefs that you've seen entrepreneurs hold or that you've experienced that can get in the way of growth or get into the way of you finding mastery in your craft or your business or whatever that looks like? What have you seen and experienced?
Yeah, there's personally a long list. So I speak from a lot of experience. And with working with so many different entrepreneurs, I can tell you that every single person out there, every entrepreneur, no matter how successful they appear to be, have these limiting beliefs. Not all of them, but they all have some. The ones that I actually see quite a lot in women especially is I'm not business savvy. That's a really huge limiting belief that a lot of them will say to me, and something that in the beginning of my career definitely had that too. I'm just not business savvy. I like my art or my craft, but how do I take that and turn it into a successful business? I'm just not business savvy. So that's a huge one. Another big one for women is I'm not a financial person. I don't understand that side. It overwhelms them and they just don't think they have that skill set. I'm not smart enough. I'm not organized enough. Those ones come into play. So those are all ones that actually are quite, I would say, the easier ones to overcome. And a lot of times we can really catch ourselves in those limiting beliefs. First and foremost, a lot of the work I do with the women are like, there's actually no such thing as business savvy. There's no one way to be an entrepreneur. And the fact that you have an idea and you're creating a business around it makes you business savvy in itself, and really letting go of that. So those are ones that I think that women, men, whatever, they all can work through. But the biggest ones that I think that are actually more on what I would say like a subconscious level that we're not always aware of, and this is a really big one that I see, and I would say like 99% of the clients that I've worked with and have had myself and still work through, are the fear of visibility, the fear of outshining others. Those are two really, really deep-seated ones that I think take a lot of inner work and awareness to really overcome. And so women just traditionally were conditioned to play small and be second fiddle. And so there comes with success comes a lot of visibility. As soon as you start to be successful, people start to pay attention. And that can be really uncomfortable, right? We have, everyone is human. And our humanness isn't always pretty and can look ugly. And when people start to look at you closely, that can feel really, really scary. And with that being said, also the fear of outshining others. When we're conditioned, like even in our society is very patriarchal. When women shine, that can create a lot of discomfort in other people, in other women, in men, just in the way that our society has been to date. And I think we're starting to really see that crumble, which is fantastic, but there's still that deep-seated fear there for many women.
Right. And I think it's so important to name that. And I can see like the kind of the first step I would guess in overcoming these limiting beliefs is being able to name them. Because like you said, some of them can be subconscious. So What kind of advice do you give your clients once they get to that point where they're able to name that limiting belief or recognize the fear of growth or of outshining others or of being more visible as they step into their greatness as an entrepreneur? What kind of advice would you give someone who gets to the point where they can name that and recognize that it is limiting their success?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of what I do with them working on mindset is I ask them really great questions to reflect on. Like, if you picture yourself 5 years out and you are successful and shining and everybody is celebrating you, who comes up? Who's uncomfortable? Who does that make uncomfortable? What comes up? And actually everyone, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, can answer that question, because there's typically somebody that will come up. And my advice is, and it's not the other person's fault that they come up, that it actually has nothing to do with them, but it's just the way you've been brought up or conditioned, society and all of that. But once they identify that source, it's really actually what I recommend they do is they sit with that fear and actually feel it in their body, because your body will go into fight, flight, or freeze when you're in fear. And at a subconscious level, that fight, flight, or fear, you will start to sabotage your success, right? Because you want to get away from that feeling in your body. But if you can just let your body know that there's actually nothing there, and you do that by just sitting in it and just like grounding yourself, saying like it's okay. So there's a lot of like, it's almost therapy actually, but there's a lot of just sitting in it that really is the way that you work through it internally. And then externally, there's a lot of like, acknowledge the fear and move forward anyway, right? It's like when you're going to jump off a boat into cold water, you're like, that's going to suck when I first enter, but it's going to feel really exhilarating when I like emerge. And so it's like, it's just like, just jump, just go for it and know that it'll feel really awesome on the other side.
That's such an interesting perspective to me, because I think most people are familiar with like the typical interview questions, or when you're starting your career, whether that's as an entrepreneur or in industry or whatever, the where do you see yourself in 5 years? But the exercise of actually thinking about who's surrounding you, who does that make uncomfortable? And then also, I guess, who does that make excited as well, to be able to sit in that, who are your cheerleaders, and understand that aspect of it too. But I think that's such an interesting activity. Do you do that frequently, or is this a continual kind of practice, I'm wondering, or
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I do it frequently because it will change. Like, we're really conditioned, in society, but for women especially too, to be people pleasers, right? And sometimes the things that you need to do in order to be successful is going to make other people uncomfortable, because that's just not what they have. Their expectation of the way that you should show up in the world is different than the way that you actually want to show up in the world. And so it's constantly undoing that people pleasing aspect of us to say, like, when I do this and I'll be successful, it's going to make others really uncomfortable. Like, just as an example, for me and my success, like the role in my family that I play is not the typical like mom role that most women are really pressured to be, right? Like, my husband's the one that organizes everything, and he's the one that has the activity list, and he does the school homework, he plans the birthday parties. I definitely take a role in that, but it's more of the secondary role, and traditionally that's the woman. And that can make other people quite uncomfortable, and I'll get comments. And even like I've shared with Victoria before, but my daycare, my husband's the primary contact. They continue to contact me when anything happens at daycare, like say there's an injury or he's sick and needs to be picked up. They contact me as the first contact, and it's like, no, that's my husband. But people are just so like used to it being the woman that they can't get around that. So in going back to your question, it's like, just constantly asking yourself, like, are you playing small because somebody else has an expectation of you and you're not meeting it, and you actually feel guilty and bad because you don't want to make other people uncomfortable, right? As women, we're nurturers. We want to see everyone happy. So there's a lot of, always having to like stay in touch with why you're doing what you're doing, and what's actually really holding you back. And like 90% of the time, what's holding you back is your discomfort with making other people feel uncomfortable. And there's a lot of guilt around it too. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's such a universal experience. Like, absolutely, as women living in a patriarchal society, there are those conditioning moments. But I even think about, for example, I grew up in a really small high school. My graduating class was 20 people. And thinking about your exercise, it's like people think they know you or have these preconceived ideas about you, or they do know you, but they have these expectations for who they think that you should be, right? And it could be that being an entrepreneur in a small town, or doing something someone's never done before, whether that's starting a business or going to university, or, whatever it is. We all come across these limiting beliefs. And I love the fact that naming the internal aspect of that is, like you said, the fear of disappointing someone else, but also acknowledging that there are those external factors that are kind of placed on it. Like, these internal beliefs don't come from anywhere.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
They're not yours. You've just adopted them. And so your job is to undo them and to make it sure that it's not your job to make other people comfortable. Even your like high school classmates, even if you're like me, like 20 years out, it's like you still kind of have those things of like, oh man, what are they? They probably think I'm like some woo-woo whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about subconscious beliefs and all of those things. But it's like, that's actually...
Sometimes it's not even true. Sometimes it is, but...
Totally.
It's a mind battle.
Yep, totally.
Absolutely. And then I'm thinking about like, we've talked about how do we overcome these internal beliefs, but there are also real, I think, external factors. or uncontrollable factors maybe that aren't necessarily internal that can come on you, whether that's like mental health is something I think all entrepreneurs have to battle because you're in such a stressful environment, whether it's the finances you put on, like your financial investment, the fact that your livelihood's riding on this, and it's things other people experience absolutely as well. But I think there are some external factors that can get in the way of being able to grow or feeling like you can grow. Have you experienced anything like that where it feels like there's these external forces at work against what you want to do in your business?
I mean, definitely, like, look at the pandemic.
Yeah.
That was an external thing that happened that really negatively affected a lot of business that you actually don't have control over. And so there's always going to be those things. And I think the key to that is actually having a strong internal game, but also acknowledging that sometimes it's just actually really hard and some things happen that just actually suck. And there's no mindsetting your way out of it. It just is what it is. And also continuing to always look for ways to move forward. And I think people have really proven, with pandemic and everything, how resilient and adaptable and creative they are in order to be able to kind of move through those things. So, yeah. And I think the other thing that's really hard for entrepreneurs, and when we talk about mental health, is, like you said, it's actually quite lonely. Even if you have a big team, you shoulder all of those responsibilities, and it can feel really lonely. So really doing things like surrounding yourself with people that really support you and people that you can have really deep conversations with that really can hold that space for you and hold that container for you to just really express how hard it can be and lonely it can be. I mean, I'm a huge fan of therapy and coaching, and I have a spiritual healer, a therapist, a coach. I work with everyone under the sun to make sure that my mindset stays as strong as possible. And even that, I can definitely have those really, really hard days. So there's definitely things that you just can't avoid.
Right. And it's interesting because I think it's so important, like you said, to be able to sit in that and recognize. I know in the workshops we've ran together, we have a module on finding that resilience and that adaptability and realizing there are things out of your control. And it's funny how it works, that it's actually really empowering once you accept that there are things that you can't control. And I know I've had other clients use the language of just accepting the outcomes. Not that as an entrepreneur you can't work hard and hustle and come up with contingency plans, but the flexibility to allow yourself to kind of sit in those different outcomes and realize there are some things that are going to come around, and it's just how you respond to them. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, that's 100%. I think it's also honoring, like, we don't have to bypass our emotions and our experience to say, like, oh, we're just resilient, we're going to move on. It's like, no, you can sit in the fact that sucked. The pandemic sucked. But just don't stay there long. That's the key. And always look for the nugget that comes out of it. And if you can stay just don't stay in victim mode too long, but just also be a human and know that that's okay for a bit, and just pull yourself out of it as soon as you can. And if you can't pull yourself out of it, and sometimes it's actually not reasonable to think you can, reach out and get other people to help you. I've had to rely on family, therapists, psychiatry, all the things to pull me out of the really hard stuff sometimes. And that's 100% okay. It can feel lonely to be an entrepreneur, but you can also reach out and get that support. It is there for you, and you're not alone. Everybody, no matter how successful, I've worked with people who've made millions of dollars in their career and have had these issues just as much as the person starting out or the person who just lost their whole business. So really important to know that.
It's almost like the language I'd use is like holding that grace for yourself and allowing you to have that grace. And then how do you adapt? And then how do you move on? And how do you bring people along to help you with that process? Yep. And I know this conversation is heavy, but I think it's important to name some of these limiting beliefs that are like we said, universal experiences. But then as we become able to name them and to recognize them and to develop tools to move past them. I'm curious, do you have any advice or perspective, and I know you do, on then how do you move into finding that alignment in your business where things seem to be coming together and you're able to grow, whether that's just grow past yourself and your limiting beliefs, or come into alignment in certain pain points in your business? How do you get from that point of, okay, I've named some of these things that are limiting my ability to grow, to actually getting to that growth stage, whether that's personal growth or business growth or growth in sales, whatever that is?
Yeah, I think through that process, you become really resilient. And my biggest piece of advice is that using what others have done as inspiration, the ones that have went before you, using it as inspiration, but also understanding that it's not a cookie cutter approach. And so really listening to your gut, your intuition, and taking those risks are what really brings you into alignment. And then that's where the excitement, the joy, the fulfillment, all of that kind of stuff comes, when we can stop operating from fear of what others will think, or, we're disrupting the industry, or we're doing really risky things and there's a lot on the line. Such fulfillment and joy comes from those experiences. And so once you're in alignment, you just feel like there's like a flow to business. And I think you go in and out of alignment throughout your entrepreneurial journey, just as your life journey as well. So, enjoy it when it's there, and when it's not there, it's not all bad. It's not all doomsday. Like, even if you're struggling, there's still really good times, but just knowing that it's all happening kind of for you. But yeah, I would say that, like, how I have found alignment is really just by connecting with self. And the one thing that I tell my entrepreneurs all the time, I'm like, feel the answer first, then crunch the numbers, do the business plan, do the like external stuff. But, coming back to like patriarchy, even in like banking and all of that, they always want to see the numbers, and that's great. I think that's responsible. But I think for women especially, it's really coming into alignment with, what does their gut say? Sometimes there's no evidence. The numbers don't match. And you've got to like have that ability to take that risk despite all the external factors being like, no, this is not a good idea. And I understand there's some danger in saying that, because I don't want to give people the illusion that you shouldn't crunch your numbers or things like that. But I've shifted. In the past, I used to do the numbers first and then make the decision from there. Now I feel into what is right for me, and then I figure out how to get there, how to make the numbers work. There's always different ways. Right. I mean, CCDF is one way, that feeling into a decision that I think is something that I want to pursue, and getting support on the number side, seeking external support that way. So that's, you found alignment when you're constantly breaking rules and you're really going with your gut, and then figuring out the how after. I think that's a switch that many people have to make. And once they start making that, that's the key to just really finding your own path, and that fulfillment and that joy. That's the success. The money part is, you get over that really quickly, right? It's like, oh, yay, I can afford a nicer car or a nicer home, but like that lasts for 5 minutes. It's how you feel during that process. That's the success in my mind.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, like, it's funny how you talk about, like really feeling that answer first and then figuring out how the numbers work with that. Because I can see someone in our credit committee going like, oh, I don't know. I know. But it's so true. But it works the other way too, right? Where like the numbers can all make sense. But if in your gut, it's not the right decision for you and your business, and you're not aligned, like you don't have that passion. I've had clients talk about that too, where, right, like there's this business opportunity where they're going to take in a new product line or something like that. And it's making them money, but like the return on investment in terms of their time, in terms of like figuring out something that really isn't truly in alignment with their why. I'm going to credit Connie Buchanan, who's one of our clients on that. I'm not going to plagiarize her here, but that's what she was talking about, how she took a product and it just wasn't in alignment. And so it took so much extra time that it didn't need to, because it didn't align with her why. And it caused so much pain, even though the numbers may have made sense in terms of like a break-even valuation, or yes, I'm going to make money off of this, but the actual time she ended up spending on it was crazy because it wasn't in alignment.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and have had those situations happen myself where people are like, you're crazy for not taking that opportunity. And it's like, yeah. And I also, know that it's just not for me and it doesn't make sense, but something about it, there's something deep in me that's just saying no. And so it's a no. It takes a lot of courage to honor that. And Connie's one of my favorite people. So I love that you shared that.
I know. I loved it. Like, that's what she talks about, right? Is finding your why and having that allow. And I think it's similar to what you're saying, right? Where it's like knowing who you are, who you want to be as an entrepreneur, what you want to do, and allowing that to align your decisions first and foremost, and then figuring out the numbers after, finding people to support you and figuring out how to do that, how to accomplish that goal.
Yes.
And it just makes life so much easier. When you know your why, you know you're aligned, it intuitively makes sense. And then
100%.
It's almost like going back to the limiting beliefs conversation. You have the confidence now to step into who you are because you're following that intuition. You know in your gut it's right. And then it doesn't matter what other people are saying or the voices that come that cause you to limit that growth.
Exactly. And you'll always know like what's your ego versus what's your inner gut feel. And it's like your gut will answer within 1 second. Your brain will kick in about 1.5 seconds later. So you have to get really good at making those really listening closely and acting quickly.
Mm-hmm. And I guess in alignment, do you have examples maybe to just take this from conceptual to really clear for anyone listening of ways you found alignment in your day-to-day in your business?
Yeah. So, I'm a huge meditator. That's been really important for me, is meditation and journaling, just to really get to the root of, is this the right decision or not? I also work with coaches and healers and therapists to also just have that container for me to just actually talk it out. Everyone knows the answer inside. I don't need anyone to tell me what to do, but sometimes I just need that container to just say everything that's on my mind and then just have that container to figure it out, right? And so somebody just listening and holding that space for me and asking me really powerful questions, that is the biggest thing that for me has helped me step into alignment. That's huge for me.
Absolutely. And we've talked about how important it is to find that alignment and realize that. And how I talked about finding your why and that. Are there examples in the day-to-day of things that you realized didn't align with who you were as an entrepreneur, what you wanted to do? And did you outsource them? How do you recognize? Because there's always going to be things that you don't want to do as an entrepreneur or that just don't come into alignment with your strengths and abilities. So how do you either develop the skills to figure that out and bring it into alignment or bring the right people along? What's your perspective on that in terms of actual operationally in your business coming across
definitely
those pain points?
Yeah, and sometimes there are things that you don't want to do that don't feel in alignment, but are not out of alignment for you, but you can bring somebody on and build your team. I'm a huge proponent of do what lights you up and makes you really passionate. And as soon as you can almost afford to bring somebody on, that's when you bring them on, because they are going to be that person that steps in and makes you takes your business to the next level. And I always say, do it when you can almost afford it, because if you can wait until you can afford it, it's it's too late. You're already blocking your growth in so many ways. So when you can almost afford it, you bring that person on. You might have to take a little dip for a month or two, and then they're the ones that will really help you scale past that, because you're your own limit, right? So team is really, really big in that perspective, I think. So that's a tactical thing that I think is really important. It's really stick to what you're good at and passionate, and outsource the rest as soon as you almost can. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so useful, actually. It's like almost like that tipping point, right?
Yep.
And recognizing when you're at that tipping point and then finding someone to help you come along, because it's like almost like this is going to be too much for me, or I'm going to grow past it and it's too late to bring that person on. It goes back to that intuition. Like, it's a really good intuitive marker, hopefully, for people listening on when you know something needs to change. It's like that you can feel it.
Totally. And I think a lot of like what is hard is like letting go, like letting go of certain parts of your business that you want to be a bit of a control freak around, and really just trusting the people to do their job and to bring it all together. You've got to, like, that journey of like letting go is super important when it comes to staying in alignment and being able to scale and grow. I think too, like, one thing that I've learned personally is like letting go of, projects or expand, like parts where lots of times people will expand their business or scale something that they've realized after the fact is not really in alignment anymore, but because they're making money off of it, it's really hard to let go of, but it's actually the thing that will sink them in the end if they continue down that path, because they're just burning out. And so letting go, taking those risks of, this program or whatever that I'm running is actually like making me a lot of money, but it doesn't feel good. And being able to let go of that is really big. Yeah.
And I think, speaking of that, I'm curious, and I ask every guest this question, but it's so interesting to hear everybody's answers. Have there been moments in your career where you've experienced a failure, or maybe you made the wrong call or something didn't go right? Because that's also going to happen, right? As we learn to navigate listening to our intuition, we're not always going to get it right, or like you almost need to learn how to hear your own voice sometimes. And are there times where you have experienced a failure in business, and then how did you respond to that? How did you overcome it?
Well, failure, what are you talking about? Oh, where do I start? Actually, what's really funny is I had a really epic fail this week. So that's really timely for you to ask that question.
Sorry to bring up new wounds.
I just got through it. No, it's so interesting. I launched a program. This week was the launch, and I was so excited for it. It's been something that's been burning in the back of my mind for a while, and I finally took action on it, and I launched it, and I got crickets. And I was so deflated because, first of all, I'm, one of my biggest like strengths is, and the things that I work a lot like practically with my clients on, other than mindset, is messaging and sales, right? Mm-hmm. And I had a launch like that, with sales strategies that I teach that failed. And it's like, oh my gosh, the imposter syndrome that came up, I had a day, let's just say that I had a day of, really going into that hole of victimhood and like, what am I doing? Like, who do I think I am? Like, why am I even teaching people this? It doesn't, it didn't even work for me. I can't even like do this. Right. And I even Googled jobs. Like it was
I've
bad.
Had those moments.
Yeah. And, but yeah, so that was a failure, and I felt really in alignment with it. I thought it was going to really take off and just be like amazing. And it wasn't. And one of the things that I learned, because I let myself have my day, right? I had my ice cream and my chocolate chips that I melt on top. And I took the next day to reflect, and I realized that I actually kind of skipped a lot of steps with it. I got a little bit arrogant, like with myself, and thinking that I could skip steps, and I actually didn't even take some of my own advice that I would share with other people in the whole strategy side of things. And I could clearly see why it didn't really take off. So I was able to really learn from that and really see there's always opportunity in the failure, right? It still sucked, and I was really like kind of mad at myself for doing that, but I was able to kind of reflect and really see where I missed some steps, and I was able to take some really good lessons from it. So I know that it just wasn't meant to be at this time, and I know exactly where it went wrong, and I know what to do better for next time. And that's really all you can do. And that's exactly how I would advise my clients. Like, not every launch goes perfectly for them, no matter how good we do on the messaging and the sales strategy. And sometimes that's just a way of, the universe saying like, that actually wasn't the right thing, but it was in the end because of the golden nugget that came out of it. The thing that I learned is actually the thing that I needed out of that. And so it's really like separating my expectations of how something should go and really just actually embracing what happened as like, no, this wasn't actually a failure. It was like a redirection from the universe. And like, thank you, even though you could have come up with a lot more better, nicer way to do that than put me through like a really hard week. But okay, here we are. So yeah, I failed many times in that way, but I think I've built this level of resilience that I've really, and I'm still working really hard on just letting go of expectations of how I think it should go so that I can really be present to what is supposed to be happening. And I can take that nugget from it. There's nuggets from success and there's nuggets from failure. It's actually equal. So yeah,
absolutely. And I love how this almost comes full circle where it is so much of limiting beliefs is that like expectation you think someone has on you, or that self-imposed expectation, and just letting go of that and then walking into who you are, responding how you need to, growing, learning. How much of that, like it's so much on expectation, whether it's internal or external or whatever it is, and just releasing yourself from that. I love it. And like you said, you can learn as much from your failures as your successes. And so I think to kind of close out this is let's end on a success too. So what's a success you've experienced in your business that we can celebrate with you? We as listeners, as CCDF can celebrate with you today.
Oh, I love that question. This is something I'm working with my therapist on. So it's a really good question right now, because I used to really tie my success to how I was doing financially. So when I had poor months, like this month is going to be actually a poor month financially for me because this launch didn't go the way that I thought. And one of the things that I've been working on is redefining success for myself. And I have two areas that I am now looking at as success. And that's like my clients give me such rave reviews and great feedback, and they're constantly texting me and saying like, thank you so much for the clarity, and I just feel really seen and heard, and I'm so excited about what's to come, and thank you, like I had a successful launch. Like really being able to have that kind of impact on other people, and them like taking the time to reach out to me and say thank you, that's success, right? And then the second one is that my therapist is like, what's another way that you're successful outside of money? And it was like, lots of people reach out to me for opportunities that's a sign of success. Like they want to hear my voice, and they want to talk to me and pick my brain. And so one of the things that I'm really celebrating is that like you guys came and asked me to do this podcast. That's success, because you said to me like, hey, Karey, we really like what you have to say and we want to amplify your voice. And I think to me, that is the success that I'm looking for and trying to look for more. I'm trying to get away from like the money and the shiny objects and the ways that society celebrates and looks at success, and really trying to look at those things. So let's celebrate me being on this podcast and being asked to be here and to amplify my voice. I thank you so much for that. CCDF is just doing amazing work in that area for Métis entrepreneurs. I couldn't be more grateful.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. And I love your answer on defining it through what your clients are saying about you too, because I think it speaks to like what I love about entrepreneurship and what I love about Métis entrepreneurship is that we're elevating our communities through our businesses too, and how we do that. And I think you defining success that way really just speaks to that, is that not only are we improving the economic circumstances of Saskatchewan's Métis to like repeat our mission at CCDF, but like the way you as entrepreneurs elevate the people around you through what you're doing and empower the people around you, I think is so powerful and absolutely something I love to celebrate every day, and especially right now. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I just feel like this has been a fantastic conversation to be able to recognize those things that might hold us back from growth, but then also to think about how we can come into alignment in what we do. And I hope people take away that. And I know it's been a really good conversation, because I've even written down that I need to put chocolate chips on my ice cream. And that's like the smallest thing I got out of this whole thing. Like, I got so many golden nuggets, but I'm going to write that one down too.
I love it.
Yeah, but no, it's just been so good. And I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, and being really vulnerable with us today. I just appreciate that, because I think there's so much power that comes from being able to talk about failures, to talk about experiences, and then people realize they're not alone in some of these things as well. So thank you so much, Karey.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. It's been wonderful chatting with you today.
So just to close, I want to remind people that, if you're an entrepreneur sitting there thinking, I need to find ways to find alignment in my business, or how Karey has talked about the importance of finding good coaches and people to ask you the right questions. Just as a reminder, CCDF does have a management skills program that can help you develop some of these skills to bring yourself and your business into more alignment. So please reach out to us, go to our website, clarencecampeau.com, and submit an inquiry, and we'd love to help you find more alignment in your business. And Karey, for those listeners that have really loved what you said today and want to hear more, where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so the best way is probably through Instagram. I'm pretty active on there. So just the @Karey Kapell, KareyKapell. And then my email, Karey@reachyournextlevel.com. And my website is reachyournextlevel.com as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for being here today. I know we've had clients that have worked with you in the past that just love the wisdom you have to share. So thank you for being willing to share some of that with us as well on this podcast.
My pleasure.
Karey and Victoria, this has been a fantastic podcast. Karey, I'm just going to echo what Victoria said. Thank you so much for being vulnerable, because as business owners, we get really stubborn, right? And those little things, and stubborn is a good thing, because that's what makes us, good entrepreneurs a lot of times. But being able to be vulnerable and realize the mistakes and not dwell on those, that's so important. And so I took that away from this conversation. Thank you so much for that. And of course, Victoria, thank you for bringing her on the show. This was absolutely fantastic. Loved every minute of it. And of course, our last thank you goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Make It Your Business podcast with Victoria Gagné. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Victoria comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at CCDF, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Make It Your Business, the podcast that identifies market opportunities and provides Saskatchewan-based Métis entrepreneurs with innovative financing and business advice. Have questions about topics covered during the show? Visit www.clarencecampeau.com. Email us at info@clarencecampeau.com or give us a call at 306-657-4870. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Clarence Campeau Development Fund. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor, accountant, or other qualified business service providers with any questions you may have regarding your individual situation.